We get skunked more because, like, I mean, the difference I think between hunting with hounds and darting with hounds is that once the cougar's in a tree, you probably are going to be able to shoot it. Whereas when we dart, we have to make sure all the conditions are safe if that animal falls out of the tree, right? Because we want it to fall asleep in the tree, or we want it to jump right away and just crawl off and fall asleep. Those are the two best options. We always carry tarps and all this stuff. But sometimes we just look at it and we're like, no, if that animal falls and we don't catch it, we're going to have to euthanize it because it's going to break something. And so that's the only time where that's probably the only time where the houndsmen and our research don't overlap 100% because they're like, but we're here. I mean, they understand, but they're like, it's there and we're here, and now you're gonna make us taste it again tomorrow. Or they usually what they do is they try to jump it out of the tree and then go tree it somewhere else.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Fair Chase podcast. Excited this week and next week to roll out two very special episodes. So as many of you know, last December, we went out to Utah to do a mountain lion hunt. And going into the hunt, we knew that this would be a bit of a controversial topic. There's a lot of legislation that has been proposed and is being proposed around hunting mountain lions using dogs and everything else. And so aside from the film that tells the story of the hunt that we were on in Utah, which turned out really cool, we decided that we wanted to get a little bit more information just to understand the ideas around conservation, mountain lions, houndsmen, biologists, and how it all fit together. So we did two special interviews with two special people. This week's is our interview that we did with Dr. Julie Young from Utah State University. She's spent her career studying large carnivores, mountain lions, and so we thought she would have a really cool perspective on everything around it. So we're going to roll out this interview. Just a little heads up, I was not mic'd. We were not planning initially on turning this into a podcast episode, but we decided that rather than pull little clips and stuff from it, we wanted to roll out the entire episode. So we're going to go through and just release this episode. And then next week, we're going to do one that we did with Dr. Sean Riley. So without further ado, here is Dr. Julie Young and the interview that we did with her in her office talking about mountain lions.
I'm Julie Young. I'm an associate professor at Utah State in the Department of Wildland Resources. I'm also the director of the Berryman Institute to reduce human carnivore sorry, that was wrong. To reduce the Berryman Institute to reduce human wildlife conflicts. And I am here in Utah and I study carnivores, including cougars.
What got you into studying cougars?
I guess what got me into studying cougars is that I was already studying a lot of carnivores and large mammals. My first introduction was I was working on guanacos in Chile, and cougars are the primary predator of guanacos. And so I was seeing that. I was seeing the cougars in person. This was in Torres del Paine National Park, where you could see them visibly. I could tell them apart by scars and this and that. And I just thought they're a really cool animal with really cool behavior. And so when I had the opportunity, when I moved to Utah to start working on cougars, I jumped.
So how widespread are cougars?
So mountain lions or cougars live all the way throughout the Americas. So they go up into Canada and Alaska, but not all the way to the northern ends of North America, and then all the way down to the tip of South America, although they're not on the island off the coast yet.
Okay. Yeah, that's incredible. The first question of things that we were wondering is, given some of the things that have happened in Colorado, talking about taking cougars off the menu for hunters totally, what would it look like if you could wave a wand and magically now starting today no one could hunt them again? What would happen to the population of cougars? What about ungulates and everything else? Like, what impact do you think that would have?
So the impact would vary based on the time frame. And the cool thing is somebody has waved the magic wand in southern Colorado and took hunting off the table for 5 years to study the impacts. The cougar population grew a lot, and what they saw was a lot more overlap between individuals. Cougars can be much more social when they are at higher densities. However, that there's going to be a tolerance, and then they're going to start fighting, which then could cause more injury and problems, which then injured cougars might be more likely to kill livestock or come into neighborhoods. to kill the easier urban deer and things like that. So in the end, it could get messy if there's too many cougars on the landscape. But that probably wouldn't happen in just a short period of time, like 5 years, because cougars take a long time. They don't breed every year usually. The mother will raise her kittens for anywhere from 1.5 years to 2 years, and she won't get pregnant again until those kittens leave. And so it's a slow growth, but in 5 years time, you might just think, wow, there's a lot more cougars out here. But in 10 years time, it might start to get messy.
Interesting. All right. So conversely, wave one, wipe them off the face of the environment where you are. What happens if you get rid of them totally?
Yeah, if you got rid of cougars totally, it would also be messy out there. Messy in other ways. The number one killer of humans in America, I believe, is at least wildlife. Sorry, not number one killer, but number one killer from wildlife is roadkill. And that's deer usually, and elk. It's you don't usually die in an accident when you hit something small. But if you hit a large ungulate, it's not usually good, and it's tragic, and it's horrible, and it costs a lot of money as well. And a lot of those animals, their populations, even if they're not regulated, they might be close to regulated by the predator communities on the landscape. And so if you lose part of that carnivore community, you can topple entire ecosystems.
This episode is brought to you by 2O Gear, innovators in technical hunting clothing. 2O is a newer company. It's based right here in Michigan, and whether you're hunting elk in the mountains or chasing antelope in the plains or traipsing through swamps after that ruddy buck, 2O has you covered with premium jackets and pants, merino wool layers, everything you could possibly need to stay comfortable in the woods. Their products are engineered for functionality and durability, ensuring you stay protected in any conditions. Plus, their camo is really effective. We're big fans. So don't take our word for it, though. Go to 2ogear.com and check it out. Interesting. So you're just thinking, at the end of the day, you're looking for some sort of balance.
Yeah, I think balance is important. I think there are probably areas, look at our national parks where cougars aren't hunted at all, and it's fine, right? They can balance out because there's other competitors there. There's a limited number of prey, and so they might balance themselves out. But in areas where we start to get into areas with livestock and with people, then you have to start looking at other ways to create that balance, because we've already thrown off the ability to balance just naturally.
Yeah, so because the human element is a big factor to consider, because we're in the landscape with them, and it seems like that's part of that kind of struggle that we're looking at, right?
Exactly. And when I say balance, I'm using that loosely. This idea that we hit some sort of equilibrium and everything's perfect forever is never going to happen. Ungulate populations fluctuate. We have a big winter, a drought. We have things that affect all of the pieces in this puzzle. So there's always going to be this variation across time. But humans have created this constant pressure, and it changes what's available to our predators, what's available to their prey. And so we do have to step in many cases because we've already stepped in.
Yeah, we're already there. We're there. So how do we find what this proper interaction is, and what does it look like? How do you figure out what balance is or should be? Like, what does that even look like?
Oh gosh. Well, if I waved my magic wand, I would have a lot of money and to collect a lot of data. But the way that we usually do it is that we look at things like, is there a sustainable, the key is the population self-sustaining? If humans don't have to go in and do things to protect a population from going extinct or from becoming too abundant, where then they might, cause conflicts or have disease issues that, cause bigger problems, then we're probably pretty close. And again, there's going to be some fluctuation because there's going to be big years and good years and bad years for those species, and years where they have a lot of offspring survive and years where they don't have much offspring survive. But in general, if over time they can just do their thing and there's a population out there, then that's what you want, even if there's some ups and downs in those numbers.
Sure. Okay. Interesting. Oh, and when we were talking, you mentioned you worked with houndsmen in the past quite a bit. Tell me about how you work with houndsmen. Are they important? What's their role in all this?
So when we're doing research on cougars, cougars are so elusive. I think I've seen, other than in Torres del Paine National Park, I've seen them in the wild in America twice, outside of my research, twice. And one, I was driving down the road. I don't even know if you can count that because I wasn't really out there, but it just happened to cross. That's the right time. But cougars, in the most part, see us a lot more than we see them. And so to study them, you have to use other things than just your ability to observe them, in person. And so what we typically do is we capture them and we put a GPS collar on them, or in the old days, a VHF collar, and then can track them through this technology. The VHF sends out a bing, so you could actually go in and listen for that with special equipment. Or the GPS will often be hooked to a satellite, and you can just pull out your satellite map on your phone or your computer and watch them that way. The way, though, that we have to capture them is two. There's two ways to really capture. Well, I guess there's three ways to capture a cougar: is some sort of leg hold trap or snare, a cage trap, or by pursuit with hounds. And then when we get them in a tree, we can dart them and lower them down and put this collar on them. I prefer that method. And so that's where the houndsmen really are outrageously helpful. When we started our research here in Utah, we had put in the original research proposal to pay professional houndsmen to come and do it. And it was going to be like one person doing it for all 3 years. And the state said, well, why don't we just open it up to houndsmen throughout the state? There's a lot of people that want to know about this. And I wasn't sure how well that would work. And it was amazing. I got to meet houndsmen from different parts of the state, work with them. We were working in 3 different parts of the state. We had houndsmen from all 3 parts and others that would come and help us. We were getting calls. It was so exciting and fun. They were really interested. And their understanding of the natural history of cougars, I actually learned so much from them in that time. I sweated a lot keeping up with them in the field, running behind them. But it was just fun because they all, even though there's a general way of hunting, they do it a little bit different. Everybody has different dogs, different nuances, the way they communicate. And so it was fun to see all the variety to achieve the same goal.
OnX is the title sponsor of our podcast here at the Fair Chase, and it's a must-have app for all of us who love to explore the outdoors. Whether you're hunting or hiking or fly fishing, OnX gives you detailed, accurate maps right at your fingertips. With property boundaries, topographical features, and trail data, you'll always know where you are and where you're headed. You'll also likely be able to figure out where that big buck is headed to. Plus, their offline maps mean you're covered even in the most remote locations. OnX is the ultimate tool for outdoor navigation, making every adventure safer and more enjoyable. Download OnX today and explore with confidence.
Interesting. You mentioned you prefer the tree to capture. Why do you prefer that?
I prefer the hounds because it's a punctuated event. You go out. Half the time you go out and you just spend a day walking in the woods, which is also nice, right? But no, you're not successful. But when you can cut a track and then successfully tree a cougar, you can dart it, you can remove it safely from that tree, you can process it, and you can let it go right away. When you have them in traps, somebody's always having to check the traps. Some animals are more fight off being in a trap. I'm not saying traps are bad by any means. They serve a wonderful purpose and I also use them, but I just get a lot more stressed out about the potential for injury when I'm using a trap than when I'm working with hounds.
Yeah, interesting. And houndsmen are an interesting group of people. Like they could be a little rougher. Is that not a big deal? It goes pretty well usually.
Okay. If it's okay, I'll tell you a quick fun story. One of our first hounds captures up here in the Cache Mountains, which is northern Utah. We got a phone call and they said, hey, we're out and we just caught a cougar in a tree. Do you want to collar it? Really close to where you are. And we said, yeah, we'll come up. And this was all with permits and stuff. And so we had to snowmobile in and we get there and they're just sitting around with a fire and just, drinking coffee or cocoa out of their mugs. And I thought you guys were supposed to be rough and tumble here. We have a fire. And I'm like, where's the cougar? And they're like, right there. And so we, got all our gear together, darted it. She fell asleep perfectly. We climbed the tree, got her down. It was the most. I was like, if all of them are going to be like this, call me any day of the week. Other times we're hiking 5-6 miles. So but they're so nice and they're so knowledgeable that it doesn't matter if it's a day where we hike 5-6 miles and it's a bust or if it's an easy day with the campfire.
So it's an interesting overlap of interests between
Biologists and houndsmen. They care about the cats, but in very different ways. It's very interesting. So tell me, we're in Utah, but let's talk about mountain lion population
in the U.S. as a whole? What is it looking like right now? How are we doing?
Right. I mean, so mountain lions used to be, long, long time ago, of course, there were a lot more mountain lions on the landscape. But we've actually done a great job of recovering populations throughout the US, especially out west. And they're even starting to show up more and more. I was just talking with a colleague in Kansas that just, I got to reschedule our meeting because I have a mountain lion issue to deal with. And so, the population has expanded enough that especially young males are now starting to disperse into areas that they haven't been for a long time. So it's pretty cool to see. There's hunting seasons now in parts of the Midwest that they haven't had in years. So it's really exciting that in most places the population is doing well or even expanding and growing. In general, we say out west, there's about 2 cougars per 100 square kilometers is kind of a general estimate. Of course, that varies if there's a bunch of cities in that 100 square kilometers or not. But so they can be at fairly high densities, but not for a large carnivore. But that's, nothing compared to densities of deer or something like that.
Why are they coming back?
They're coming back. A lot of it is just the way that we've managed wildlife in America. We've stopped doing large-scale poisoning and trapping campaigns, and instead try to manage a problem instead of managing instead of treating the population as the problem. We treat the individuals causing conflicts as the problem, so you can selectively remove the one causing a problem instead of harming an entire population. And so that's really led to the recovery of the species.
Interesting. And so, specifically, we're doing this in Utah. We're doing this hunt here, and one of the big things is, 2 years ago, there's now no tag requirements for hunters. There's just a base license, and you have no tag limit. There's a lot more open. What does the population look like in Utah, and what's the impact that's had so far, that change in policy?
So when we were doing our big study on cougars across Utah, basically in 3 different mountain ranges, this was before the new law got put into place, where it's basically no tag or this, over-the-counter easy tag. They used to be much more limited by each hunting unit on how many cougars could be taken and everything like that. And we had cougars sometimes taken that were collared. A lot of times they weren't taken because if it was our houndsmen that were out on a hunt, they wanted to know about the life history of the cougar more than they wanted to shoot that cougar, so they would just walk away. But there are other hunters in this area, and so but we didn't have much loss from hunters at all. Our study ended at about the time that this new policy for sort of what I'll loosely call an unlimited hunt came into place. And so we can't really say how that's going to affect the population because most of our GPS collared batteries were dying at the same time. We have had a few reported because they're also wearing the collar and ear tags. And so we do know a couple of them have been taken, but I don't know on which sort of tag. There's concern overall that this isn't the best route to go because our state agency employees are trained experts in managing wildlife populations. And this has taken that their expertise and their knowledge and their control out. And so, I'm concerned that by not using sound science, that this could be a detrimental impact to the population of mountain lions. But I think it's too early, I think, to know.
Yeah. And just aside from the film, it's like, that's a concern, I think. It's a concern move. Again, you don't know what's going to happen, but it seems like he can get an idea what may happen. Even the houndsmen we're talking with,
they don't like it. I didn't want to speak for them, but they were opposed to it when it was coming out.
It's just like it's the same. It's that overlapping interest. You want them to be there.
I mean, I'd laugh because we'd be at a meeting and it would be them and PETA fighting the same way, and then it's like, well, once this is over, they're going to stop.
Sometimes, okay, and so. Well, while we're talking about hunting, what impact does hunting have? What is that on lions? How does hunting kind of play into this?
How hunting plays into this, I think, again, it just varies. When you're doing sound hunting management, then it can help with creating a healthy and robust population. And I think that's what most states in the West are aiming for, or all states are aiming for, and that's what most states, I think, have accomplished really well. I think it's possible that hunting can help. We know that mountain lions in areas where they're hunted might be more likely to avoid humans. So that might help with some human safety issues. But there's still some, more research to be done on that.
Yeah, interesting. One other thing we talk a lot about is like misconceptions around mountain lions and hunting and their impact on the environment. Like, what are some misconceptions that you encounter in your daily life when it comes to mountain lions?
When it comes to mountain lions, I think I encounter a lot of misperceptions, of course. The first is just a fear of them. And I mean, I think that's rightfully so, right? It's a large carnivore. It has been known to kill and attack humans and people's pets, which is tragic. But when we think about how many mountain lions are out there and how many humans are out there, it's really rare. You're much more likely to have other bad things happen. And just having an understanding, though, of the ecology and behavior of mountain lions and how to be safe when you're in their home is an easy way to dispel that. The second one I think I get a lot is about hunting and what is and isn't okay to do. And I think a lot of people think of hunters as just being bloodthirsty, they and to the credit of the people that think that, there are those exceptions and people posting really awful pictures and comments and things like that in the public spaces that can then reinforce that belief. And so, I'm not defending that either, but I think at least the houndsmen, for instance, that I work with are, again, I think I already mentioned this, but some of the best natural history people I've ever met. And not just about cougars, but it is amazing. I mean, you'll go out there and you're on a track and they'll be like, oh, that's a female. She's probably 4. Oh, it looks like she probably ate in the last couple of days. Her tracks are heavier than last time I saw her. And I'm like, the first time I'm always like, oh, they're just trying to show off. And no, they're right. We dart them, we collar them, we check their teeth for age, we get genetics, and we're like, yep, this is all correct. And so it's amazing. There's the deep knowledge and honestly, I feel like affection and love and definitely respect. Some of them, I even think they won't admit it, but they love these lions that you see. And just for that whole environment, I mean, they can tell us whether the deer population was good or bad, even if they're not deer hunters, just because they're tracking everything that's out there. They can tell us about the hare populations and the rabbits and everything that they're seeing. And was it a good, mast year for the bears, or are there going to be more bear cougar conflicts this year? And it's just amazing that that there's a group of people that are so invested in the species that they're, pursuing, basically. And I mean, there's one guy up here that even all the other houndsmen don't like because that's his attitude. And
that's humans though, anything. But no, I see that, and we feel that. Well, even we're out here, we post something of us following dogs, and like the first comment we get is, "You guys, hunting with hounds is bullshit." In my opinion, I'm like, well, have you ever done it or even seen it? And hunting with dogs, is that now duck hunting and squirrel and rabbit and all the things you use and dogs love to do. It's just kind of an interesting. It's just there's a lot of layers to this, to lions, to hounds, and this. It's a big topic.
Well, I mean, that's like I work on one of the things I do with human wildlife conflict is the guardian dog work I've done, and the 5,000 years, people have been using dogs to protect from carnivores. And there's always these bonds. And we know we've been hunting with them even before that. And so it's like, this is just part of how humans became humans, is working with dogs on the landscape. And so whether it was to protect their livestock or to, hunt something themselves. And so the houndsmen are just like the old school tradition of human evolution.
Right. Well, and those questions then come up for this. It's like, all right, well, hunting with a rifle is unfair. Hunting with a compound versus a traditional art. And you get into all these like little battles about it. And I guess there are important lines to draw, but it's, the dog one is hard for me to understand. If you ever done it and tried it, you think it's very easy, then go out there and it'll beat the tar out of day. Well,
and you get skunked a lot. We get skunked more because the difference I think between hunting with hounds and darting with hounds is that once the cougar's in a tree, you probably are going to be able to shoot it. Whereas when we dart, we have to make sure all the conditions are safe if that animal falls out of the tree, right? Because we typically we want it to fall asleep in the tree, or we want it to jump right away and just crawl off and fall asleep. Those are the two best options. We always carry tarps and all this stuff. But sometimes we just look at it and we're like, no, this is, if that animal falls and we don't catch it, you know, we're going to have to euthanize it because it's going to break something. And so that's the only time where that's probably the only time where the houndsmen and our research don't overlap 100% because they're like, but we're here. I mean, they understand, but they're like, it's there and we're here. And now you're going to make us chase it again tomorrow. Or usually what they do is they try to jump it out of the tree and then go tree it somewhere else. But sometimes you lose it doing that.
One of the, and I mentioned this going into this hunt, was I had never seen one in outside of a zoo. So when we walked up on it, it was one of the more surreal moments to see this lion in a landscape that I've been in. And I, like, you know, I had never seen that. Heard them. You could, that chirp that they could make, that noise, and seeing tracks and evidence, and even in Michigan, seeing some their sign. Tell me about, like, when you first saw your first mountain lion.
Well, the first one I saw was Torres del Paine. I mean, I'd see them all the time down there. We actually watched one hunt, Guanaco. It was really cool. Yeah, that was cool. But then when we were, the first one I saw here in the United States, though, was driving back from Fort Collins to here. And I was a grad student at the time, and it was really late at night, so it was already dark. And I turned off from the road in Wyoming that takes you in this little highway, and I turned left, and this mountain lion just ran across. I mean, you could tell I caught it unexpectedly. And I was like, oh my God, there's a mountain lion. And I was like, Heath, my husband was asleep. I was like, Heath, look. And he's like, what? And I was like, oh, well, now it's dark. You get He's like, why did you wake me? And I was like, I was just really excited. I forgot the fact that we wouldn't be able to see it the minute it got out of my headlights.
But there's just like an amazing, you know,
Seeing it in the tree and even walking up to it, just the size of this animal and just how beautiful it is. It was just one of the more stunning moments I've had outside. Beautiful. This animal that, you know, like I said, growing up, I was obsessed with cats for whatever reason. And so those kind of, just to see one close is amazing.
Yeah, they're cool. We one of my last sightings in completely wild, we were in the Everglades. And I went out on a hike, and it was vacation. It was 2020 and my husband's an ER nurse. So he was like, we got to get out of town. I need a break. And so we, you know, did where we were just totally on our own in South Florida, you know, in our own Airbnb and everything. But we had gone to the national park for a hike, and we heard somebody talking about a photographer getting really good pictures of pumas. I guess they call them panthers there. And I said, oh, where, you know, and they said, oh, but you know, they're really hard to see. And I was like, okay, thanks. And my husband was like, well, why don't you tell them, like, because they were treating us, you know, kind of like normal dumb tourists that would think you just can go to this exact spot and there'll be a mountain lion waiting for you. And he's like, why don't you tell them what you do? And I was like, like, they don't need to know. And so anyway, we had been kayaking all day, and I was like, I really want to do, it was our last day there. I was like, I really want to do this hike. I know we've had a huge day, but we can go at sunset. And he's like, I need to relax. And I was like, okay, I'm going. And so I got in the car, drove to this trailhead, hiked. It's 5 miles round trip, got all the way to the end of the trail, didn't see one. I was like, well, it's still a nice hike. Hiking back, and it came across, and I stopped, and I was just frozen. I couldn't take a picture or anything. I was so excited to see it, and it had the little kink in its tail it was crazy. But anyway, and it ran off, and I got home, and I was like, oh, I was driving back. I thought, he's never going to believe me because I don't have a picture. And I pulled in, and he goes, oh, your face gives it away. You saw. I didn't even say anything. And I was like,
close, yeah. That is his goals. Yeah.
So.
That's amazing.
So even though I study them all the time, I still I'm super excited when I see them.
They're just okay. So one more question for you. This is that on the thing, but so puma, panther, cougar, mountain,
Catamount,
or catamount.
There's more. I forget.
Yeah, I was gonna say. I knew it.
I read somewhere. I didn't fact check this, but I read somewhere that it's one of the most, most highest number of common names for the same animal.
Interesting.
And I believe it, though, because it's range. I mean, only the gray wolf probably of the large carnivores has a bigger range. Or the same range, maybe, because it's circumglobal. Yeah. But it's in areas with less people. So I would bet, I mean, it makes sense if you think about it that way.
What's your preferred term?
Utah, I say cougar. We're doing research in California. It's mountain lion. In Torres del Paine, it's puma. because it's Spanish anyway. But
Yeah.
so I actually wish we all just use puma because it's the gene, it's the genus. It makes more sense. Everybody knows what you're talking about. But in science, I usually use cougar more often because there's word counts on papers, and mountain lion, every time you say it, it's 2 words.
That would have been neat. To see, but that's how you get that paper to hit that words like sugar, commonly known as.
Especially in the abstract, you're like, nope, we're saying cougar. So I know it's pathetic. It's like when people ask me coyote or coyote. I'm like, whatever you want to say. I don't know.
I go back and forth.
I say them both.
I heard somebody say that you call him a coyote until you punted him, and once you punted him for whatever reason, you start calling him coyote.
Coyote. Oh, that's funny.
It was a Steve Ranella something, but so if you had to have a billboard that kind of encapsulates what we're talking about and have a message for the public to know from someone who's an expert in it, what would you say?
I would say that I can't do research as well as I do it if I can't work with houndsmen. They give us so much more information. They give us access to so many more cougars. We have a new study going on in California, for instance, and we are relying on our houndsmen to capture and collar them, and also to do the hazing part, where once we, where we can capture them to do some hazing of the cougars to reduce conflicts. But without houndsmen, my data would not be as robust, and we wouldn't know as much as we know about mountain lions.